West Virginia Public Energy Authority to order. I'll ask our Secretary Treasurer to take us on roll. I'll acknowledge the presence of quorum. This time, we want the approval of the minutes from our September 28th meeting. They were distributed to all of our members previously, so unless anyone has any comments or corrections to make to the minutes, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes distributed.
So moved.
Second. All in favor? Aye. Okay, motion's approved. Now we'll start our presentations for the day. First up, I'd like to welcome both Rebecca McPhail, who is the president of the West Virginia Manufacturers Association, and Mark Brown, regional director of CEA Northeast Consumer Energy Alliance, who will present to us proposed legislation, which I believe has been introduced in the legislature, a version of it has been introduced previously, but they're taking a run at it this year, and I thought it would be, affects the topics that we're trying to address. So, without, no intent for the authority to take a position on it one way or the other, but at this time, I think we get to just learn about this, and then maybe even in our January meeting here for some other groups, legislation that's going to affect our energy sector. So at this time, I'll turn it over to Rebecca. Thank you very much for being here.
Mr. Bailey, thank you for the invitation. Thanks to the authority for the opportunity to come and talk with you today about some issues that the West Virginia Manufacturers Association is following and supporting on the policy front. I am the president of the WVMA, and we obviously are a trade association that represents the interests of manufacturing in West Virginia, primarily through policy advocacy and mobilization. I think it's fair to say, and the reason that we're here today is that the WVMA and its members support in all of the above, and I like to remind people and below, energy policy in West Virginia. To that end, the WVMA supports clearing a path for natural gas power generation in West Virginia. We believe that there's potential in considering legislation similar to House Bill 4622 that was introduced during the 2022 regular legislative session. Legislation that would identify and pre-certify sites for natural gas power plants by streamlining the regulatory process. And I think maybe part of understanding our support for that legislation is to look at exactly why we have that need in West Virginia, if I can make the clicker work. This happens every time. Oh, wrong one, okay. This is why they don't let me deal with the technology in my own office. Oh, there we go. So it was just that front one, okay. So you see a couple of bullet points on the slide: job creation, economic growth, and expanded PJM capacity. In the past, West Virginia has lost opportunities to develop natural gas power due to lengthy permitting and approval processes. In addition to the loss of billions of dollars of investment, we've missed the opportunity to create hundreds of good-paying jobs, to maximize the benefit of our natural gas resources in West Virginia, and to expand our presence as a supplier of energy in an ever-changing PJM market. Recently announced plans to develop an 1,800 megawatt combined cycle power station in Doddridge County look to provide $3 billion of investment in West Virginia, more than 1,000 West Virginia skilled labor jobs, and 200 full-time jobs once fully operational. All right, we're winning. The slides are working. So this slide just gives you a depiction and shows you that when it comes to natural gas power generation, despite an abundance of the resource in West Virginia, we sit at the bottom 10 for in-state natural gas power generation. Despite the fact that we're 5th in the U.S. for marketed natural gas production, we are 42nd in the United States in net natural gas generation for the electric power sector. So these things don't seem to balance particularly well. So that has a regional impact, especially when it comes to the PJM. If you look at our neighboring natural gas-rich states, West Virginia is dramatically outpaced by our neighbors when it comes to natural gas power generation. You'll note that more than 50% of the power generation mix in both Ohio and Pennsylvania are fueled by natural gas. And something that we've noticed or we've watched happen in West Virginia in recent years is our legislature taking action to diversify energy sources here in the Mountain State. Yet the abundance of natural gas that we enjoy is largely unutilized for power generation. Natural gas provides an opportunity, as we've seen, for economic and energy diversity. Natural gas-fired power generation can also contribute to the demand for lower emissions and the environmental goals of an evolving manufacturing sector. Many manufacturers, some of whom are members of our association, have adopted ambitious goals aimed at reducing CO2 emissions and achieving a larger energy mix, and can help achieve those goals and address problems yet to be solved with some forms of renewable energy which are intermittent and unreliable by their nature. I think it's important as we have this conversation and we move toward the legislative session to understand that support of natural gas power generation is not putting one energy source over another. Instead, it's about maximizing the resources that we have in West Virginia for broader economic benefit. While West Virginia is committed to coal-fired power generation, not every member state of the PJM shares that same sentiment. Just days ago in New Jersey, a coal-fired power plant was imploded in favor of planned storage facility development for wind and solar. A second plant is slated in New Jersey for this group in September, I guess the last meeting of the PEA. Stu Bressler, who's the senior VP of the PJM, cited the need for new energy sources to keep up with resource retirements like the plant in New Jersey. When 1 megawatt removed, 1 megawatt added. So we look at this as an opportunity. Until the challenge of intermittent renewables is solved, reliability is vital. Representing an industry as I do that must have reliable and affordable energy, I can tell all of you that this is top of mind for our members. In the case of changes to the resources in New Jersey, wind and solar cannot yet consistently provide the stable capacity generated by the shuttered plant, and it'll be a long time before they can. This presents, once again, an opportunity for West Virginia to add natural gas generation and provide reliable, affordable, environmentally competitive energy in the broader PJM market. So just a few parting thoughts before I turn things over to Mark. Natural gas plays obviously a very minor role in West Virginia power generation, and we as a state could do much more to develop natural gas as an energy resource. This can benefit our state in the future as we realize economic prosperity and a greater demand for reliable and affordable energy. With nearly 20 manufacturing investments announced in the last year alone, the need for reliable energy grows in West Virginia. Natural gas-fired power generation in West Virginia can benefit our state now by providing baseload stability in the PJM. West Virginia obviously is well positioned to help meet market demands while preparing for long-term transitions as part of the PJM market, and we hope that we can move policy forward that paves the way to really maximize those opportunities. And I'm happy to answer questions, but I think we will let Mark go, and then we will answer questions together based on his presentation.
Well, first, I want to thank the Public Energy Authority for the opportunity to present and speak before you here today. My name is Mark Brown. I'm Vice President of State Affairs for Consumer Energy Alliance. CEA is a nationwide association. We're made up of both energy producers and consumers, looking to advance in all of the above energy environmental policies that deliver affordable and reliable energy to families and businesses. As you can see here, we have over 500,000 individual grassroots members, nearly 400 affiliate members, 65% of which are consumers, and we have chapters all over the country. We pretty much cover the entire United States except for maybe the western states and a few states in between. You see our board there. With the exception of the Virginia Manufacturers Association, everyone on that board has a footprint in West Virginia. These are some of our campaigns. They're diverse. You see, wind, carbon capture, pipelines, solar. We want to promote environmental stewardship while also simultaneously driving down consumer costs. So we're looking at, we definitely promote an all of the above energy strategy. Okay, looking at this slide. In 2020, West Virginia was the second largest coal producer in the U.S., accounting for 13% of coal production. And coal-fired generating plants were responsible for 88% of net generation in the state. Renewables, primarily hydro and wind, accounted for 6%, and natural gas was roughly 3%. As you can see, West Virginia is also increasing its natural gas production, where it's now fifth highest production state in the country. This is a little slide showing some of the emissions. So, gross domestic product in the U.S. has increased 272%. Vehicle miles traveled increased 194%. Population by 60%. Energy consumption increased 37%, all while aggregate emissions declined by 78%. The point of this slide is to kind of show that you can decouple GDP from emissions. You can have economic growth and declining emissions. This is the slide I was referencing earlier. Emissions have declined in West Virginia as a result of companies implementing the best available technologies, mainly scrubbers, and as a result of closing generating assets. Since 1990, West Virginia has shuttered 3.8 gigawatts of coal-fired plants, and unlike neighboring states, have not seen replacements. In 2008, West Virginia produced about 250 billion cubic feet of natural gas. Fast forward to 2021, and West Virginia produced 2 trillion cubic feet of natural gas. Again, fifth highest production in the United States. Also during that time, oil production grew from 2.8 million barrels to over 18 million barrels. So this is a slide. This is based on some data that CEA put together showing savings analysis from kind of the shale revolution. So if you use 2006 as a baseline and the declining costs between now and 2021 of natural gas, during that time, $8.7 billion in consumer savings to West Virginians, $2.9 billion on the residential side, $2.7 billion on the commercial side, and $3 billion had more natural gas plants in West Virginia. Since 1990, generating capacity increased 45% in Pennsylvania, 14% in Ohio, but slightly decreased by approximately 1% in West Virginia. West Virginia is becoming less cost competitive than neighboring states. Electricity rates in West Virginia increased 87.5% since 1990, while in Pennsylvania, they only increased by 30%, and in Ohio, 65.7%. But on the industrial side, West Virginia saw a 70.5% increase, while Pennsylvania only increased 9.5%, and Ohio, 62.5%. Proximity to supply avoids high transportation costs, allowing for more competitive fuel prices. Ohio has built nearly a dozen new gas plants with nearly $16 billion invested in those plants. Pennsylvania has 20 new and proposed natural gas plants, creating more than 6,000 construction jobs. Since 2006, natural gas generating plants increased by 15.1 gigawatts in Pennsylvania and 6.3 gigawatts in Ohio. West Virginia is a bit of a donut hole when it comes to natural gas generating plants. There's a few older plants there in the west, but other than that, you really don't have any. Lack of new combined cycle plants means that West Virginia has no generating plants that are capable of running on hydrogen. Latest generation power plants in Ohio and Pennsylvania with GE and Mitsubishi turbines are designed capable of handling hydrogen blends with natural gas. I've been all over the country this year. I've been in blue states, red states, purple states. I've been at events like this, large chamber events with hundreds of people, energy industry events, regulatory events. Everyone's talking about hydrogen. So West Virginia doesn't want to get left behind when it comes to hydrogen. The Long Ridge Energy Facility in Monroe County in Ohio, it's the first plant in the United States to blend up to 20% hydrogen and can transition to 100% hydrogen when available. And I guess I'll leave with one more anecdote, because I know the discussion here is about facility siting to some extent. I live in New Hampshire in the Northeast. The Northeast is dramatically constrained from an energy perspective. We have a lack of natural gas pipeline infrastructure, and we have adopted it's not NIMBY anymore, we call it NOPE, not on planet Earth, because we don't cite anything. We have states with very aggressive decarbonization goals, renewable energy goals, and they have towns and they have districts putting up opposition to solar plants, wind farms, transmission lines to import hydroelectricity from Canada. We can't build anything in New England, and it's to the point now where we have serious reliability issues, where FERC and NERC are hearkening about concerns about reliability. So I'll just leave you with that, and I think I guess we're going to take some questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. This time I'll open for questions for Mr. Brown or
Two questions. The first is, I guess for both of you, can you speak to currently in West Virginia plants? Are there any plans moving forward? Is there 21 in Ohio? What's the status for West Virginia in regards to the future of gas plants?
I think most recently the Doddridge County announcement, that is the only one that I am aware of is in the works. Of course, I think there's some work with Longview Power. They're moving along, but obviously not operational. Will we be continuing to?
And Rebecca, this question is more geared toward you. The authority is not only going to be the names
years ago when there was an announcement of a possible ethane cracker in Wood County, which did not come to fruition. But as ethane crackers are coming online in Ohio and Pennsylvania, there's a real opportunity for manufacturing growth through the downstream derivatives created by ethane in our natural gas industry. So that's something that we've been a proponent of, worked with our friends in the Gas and Oil Association and broader industry to try to really build on an already strong chemical sector in West Virginia, which is the largest manufacturing sector in the state, and leverage our position in that space for more chemical and petrochemical development.
Any other questions? I have one kind of a two-parter for you, Rebecca. Here are the Natural Gas-Fired Electricity Generation Development Act. It focuses on permitting. Could you maybe address in more detail about how that, how those legislation help us overcome whatever those hurdles are with permitting? But also, the second part is, my understanding is, that there have been previous natural gas power plants that received their second permits, but have not come to fruition. So can you also address kind of, what other obstacles, particularly from a state policy standpoint, that we have that are preventing this?
I will say that I am not a natural gas industry leader, so I will speak to what I know, and obviously be happy to do some research or to make some connections with folks who can speak to that more in more depth. But when we're looking at the legislation, certainly what we focused on that we thought was strong about 4622 during last year's session, and I would imagine that there'll be changes to that, so I won't go into the specific detail, but it's essentially a bill that would allow identification, and I believe what will ultimately happen is that bill would ask that our West Virginia Economic Development Office identify sites that are appropriate for natural gas-fired power generation. I believe 4622 has another agency or entity designating those sites, which may change, as I said. And secondarily, it would ask that our Department of Environmental Protection, Division of Air Quality, proactively look at whether or not that site, those sites have the capacity to meet national ambient air quality standards and do some proactive modeling that would alleviate some of the concern and some of the drag in permitting once someone comes and decides to site there, and then applies some timeframes to the PSC for approving those sites. Again, some of those provisions may change or may be refined as this, we go into the second year of looking at this type of policy in West Virginia. And certainly, we cannot control what our friends in the legislature do with legislation once it starts moving. So what it might be introduced as may not be what it comes out of the process looking like. So as to the law's past development, I think, and this is sort of my on the outside looking in from the manufacturing perspective and not as an oil and gas industry expert, looks like a lot of litigation in some cases. One of the issues that we had with the large investment was a long, drawn-out legal appeal to the permits that were granted that slowed the process and chilled the investors, causing them to move on to other opportunities. So this is, there are some appeal provisions in the legislation that wouldn't allow these things to drag on such that we lose those opportunities.
Thank you. Any last final questions? Seeing none, Ms. McFell, Mr. Brown, really appreciate you being here to speak to us about this today.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
This time I will welcome Mark Muco, Deputy Campus Secretary for the West Virginia Department of Revenue, to talk to us about trends and what's going on in our state of severance taxes, which has been interesting.
Good morning. I was asked a few days ago to talk about severance taxes. So I pulled up a few old slides and a few new slides. One thing we can say about severance tax is it changes frequently and it's quite volatile. So let's get into what's going on with severance tax. First of all, some background information. First, need a definition of what severance tax is. There was many years ago a consultant for a company based in New Jersey that was thinking about coming to West Virginia. Wanted to know if that company was subject to severance tax. And the company was in the communications sector. They just had no idea what severance tax was because a number of states are familiar with this concept. But severance taxes are incurred when non-renewable natural resources are extracted or severed within a Texan jurisdiction. It's a good old Wikipedia definition. At last count, we have about 35 states in the United States that tax something under severance. That also includes the state of Florida, by the way, in there. Oil, natural gas, and coal are the top three minerals, so you're usually subject to such a tax. And here's my first mistake. I have fiscal year 2013. That should be fiscal year 2019. I updated the slide, forgot to update the fiscal year. I could have gone more recent than 19, except 20 was COVID epidemic year, and then 21 was recovery year, so I thought 19 was the last best base year to use. And in 19, we, across the states, collected $14.5 billion in severance taxes. Sounds like a lot of money, but it was only about 1.3% of total state tax collections nationwide. So these taxes are much more prevalent in small states and much less prevalent in large states. Right now, there's no severance tax in New York, Pennsylvania, or Illinois. Those are large states. Particularly Pennsylvania and Illinois produce significant amounts of minerals, but there's no official severance tax in those states. Pennsylvania does have a fee that they impose upon natural gas drilling industry, and it's averaging, give or take a little bit, about $200 million a year for the state. Most of those fee monies end up going back to the local governments where the activity occurs. 2/3 of all severance taxes are imposed by Texas, North Dakota, and New Mexico. Those states have a lot of oil, and also in case of New Mexico and Texas, a lot of natural gas. On a per capita basis, and these things change quite a bit. This is for fiscal year 19. In Alaska, $529 per capita. That is way down from where it used to be. It used to be like $15,000 per capita. Alaska's got the problem of depletion. They're running out of resources to be extracted, so they're facing some long-term economic challenges associated with a declining petroleum industry. I've been a petroleum leader in recent years, $2,134 per capita. Wyoming's $154 per capita. Now, if you add Alaska, North Dakota, and Wyoming together population-wise, you get pretty close to West Virginia. So these are relatively small states in terms of population. In West Virginia, it's $153 in 2019, $1,742 in Texas. Now, Texas has a lot of people, but they are the #1 energy-producing state in the country by far. And they actually have more oil and gas wells than West Virginia has. West Virginia is like about #2 in number of oil and gas wells. Texas is #1. And then close to our neighboring state of Kentucky, it's only $19 per capita. Collections are highly volatile. And in terms of the severance tax, there's been some folklore that the severance tax in West Virginia was a recent development. Actually, we've had severance tax in West Virginia going way back to 1921. We called it something else back in those days, but the first known severance tax on mining was 0.4% of gross receipts levied back in 1921. We officially changed the name of our severance tax to severance tax in 1987, but we had the tax long before that. Collection-wise, this is across all states. Collections have varied from, and I don't have 22 on here, but when I put 22 on here, 22 will be an all-time record when 22 comes on. Alaska and Wyoming. In North Dakota, New Mexico, Alaska, and Wyoming, a good part of the severance tax money ends up in trust funds as opposed to general spending funds. And those states are also different in that they're western states. And in the western states, oftentimes either the state or the federal government owns the natural resource mineral rights, whereas in eastern states, the mineral rights are privately held. So the taxation is a little different out west than it would be back here in the east on those collections. By the way, on severance tax share, West Virginia's share, which was 8% and historically has been between 5 and 10, it's probably going to be north of 15% when this fiscal year ends. So it's much higher than it has been in recent past. Natural gas production, folks are probably familiar with this. Our natural gas production has greatly expanded for many, many years. I've been in West Virginia for a long time. We were around 200 million MCFs per year. And then Marcellus Shale started around 2011 or so. And we were about 540 million MCFs. And as of 2021, 2.76 trillion. Probably going to be close to 2.9 trillion in 22. The production numbers were going up consistently, 30%, 30%, 30% a year. The most recent year is probably going to be closer to 5%. So production numbers have slowed down. That has not slowed the revenues. When we had all this production increases, we actually had years where our revenues would go down because our severance tax is based on gross receipts attributable to sale of minerals. So it's a combination of your production and your price. Put those two together. And on the pricing side, this is the average monthly natural gas prices obtained from Eastern Gas Hub. Used to be called Dominion. Going back to 2014, the overall monthly average is just a little bit north of $2 per million BTU. More recently, in May of 22, it was $7.29. I think it got up pretty close to $8 in July. It's gone down to below $5 in around October. So it does bounce around a lot, and typically there's seasonality here with prices going up near the winter months and prices going down in the spring and summer months. More recently, because of political issues, mainly in Europe. In Europe, about half of their natural gas supply has traditionally come from Russia. The Russian supply has gone down to a trickle. So these are worldwide commodities. The United States is helping to fill in that gap gradually through liquefied natural gas exports. And that's driven the price of natural gas up quite a bit recently. These are the prices at the hub. Now the price on the severance tax return is going to be lower because it's based on the value at the wellhead. So any cost beyond the wellhead to get that product line would come off. That's mainly a transportation allowance. In our state rules, there's a safe harbor of about 15%. That's usually the minimum. Depending upon where the price is, it could be a lot higher than 15%. But 2020 was a bad year. That was COVID year. Our average price on the tax return was less than 80 cents per 1,000 cubic feet. And then it jumped to about $2.20 in 2021. And it's jumped much higher in 2022, and it'll also show up on the numbers down the road here on that. Coal production, other major resource, and prior to about 2012 or so, coal used to be 85 to 90% of our severance tax. And natural gas and oil made up a good part of the rest. Now coal is closer to 30%. So big changes are going on in coal relative to natural gas and oil. Coal production, if you go way back into the late 1990s, we peaked around 180 million tons. As of recently as 2012, it was 121 million tons. COVID year, our lowest level since the Spanish flu, about 67 million tons. And then it rebounded to about close to 79 million tons in 2021. In 2022, it'll be low 80s, maybe 82, 83, give or take a little bit. So a little bit of an increase in 22. Not a whole lot of increase. But again, price matters. As of May of this past year, we got very close to $150 a ton. The coal market has softened up quite a bit. Steam coal market's still very strong. We're now down somewhere around $110. That's a pretty good movement there. But $110 compared to 70 is still a very good increase in price, which leads to higher severance tax. This is a trend on severance taxes, and I use a different month than the calendar month because tax is always due on the last day of the month, so my month is from the 6th to the 5th. That smoothed things out quite a bit. And our recent peak was June of 2019 at about $478 million in total severance tax. And that fell to less than $250 million as of December of 2020. It's now up over $1 billion. So we've gone up, basically multiplied what we had there by more than 4 times in just in less than 2 years. And that may be one of the reasons why we have huge revenue gains in the budget. Certainly the severance tax and all the revenues associated with severance tax, because it's not just the severance tax. Those of us in this room that own royalty interest, your natural gas royalties are probably a lot higher this year than they were 2 years ago. Your checks are higher. That means higher income taxes. Also means higher property taxes for the counties that have those wells. The richest counties in West Virginia are natural gas counties. Tyler, Wetzel, Doddridge, Marshall, Harrison to some extent. Those are rich counties. Not like poor counties. A poor county would be a county like Berkeley. They have a lot of homes. A whole lot of no minerals of any great extent in Berkeley County. So the natural resources does play a big role in finances, not only for the state, but also for local governments. 12-month trailing trend on severance tax collections by type of mineral. And the blue bar at the bottom is coal. And back in 2014, total severance taxes were about $450 million, and coal was about $350 million. So coal was a very big share. Today, coal is about $350 million. So it had gone down to about $148 million, but it's back up $354 million, but it's not a whole lot different than it was in 2014. Natural gas, on the other hand, has greatly changed. At the end of 2020, early 2021, the 12-month trailing trend on natural gas was about $71 million. Very low prices. Now, latest reading, actually, we're a month behind there, but the latest reading is now over $600 million. We've gone from 71 to $600 million plus in natural gas. 95% of that movement, close to 95%, is price. Maybe about 5% is production, but almost all of it is price. Oil was around $18 million. It's now around $65 million. We produce maybe 18 to 20 million barrels of oil a year, which is a lot higher than it has been in the past, but we're not going to set the world on fire with oil. And then other severance tax, and there's a little bit of sand and other things mixed in there, but the bulk of the other severance tax would be gas liquids, not otherwise quantified or taxed elsewhere, and that's over $100 million. So that all goes together with the oil and gas industry. So you said the big increases in severance, pretty good movement in coal, but the big increase is oil and natural gas here recently. Unfortunately, the coal industry, which I always thought was a bit volatile, the coal industry is stable. It moves, but it doesn't move as rapidly from time period to time period as gas does. So with gas, you're going to have some nice boom times and some bust times. And it's a matter of where we'll be. We're probably, definitely $250 million is too low. That was COVID. That's not a normal yield on severance tax in these days. But $1.1 billion is probably not a normal yield either. So if for some reason the folks in Ukraine and Russia shake hands in the next few months and things settle, you might see some movement in the gas prices. Severance tax, this is hard to read, but you've got a hand on it. Where the severance tax goes, well, the legislature over the years has figured out very complex formulas to divide the monies up. And this is just a little bit out of date, but it's not too bad. On the far left is the coal severance tax, and we actually have different rates on coal severance. All depends on what you're producing. Thin seam coal, if you're underground mines and it's below 45 inches, you're either taxed at a total rate of 2% or a total rate of 1%. There goes some coal right now. Maybe, that's on the wrong side of the tracks. And then steam coal, recently the legislature adopted lower rates on 5%. That's included in the total rate. And that 0.35% is divided in two ways. 75% goes to the coal producing counties, and 25% is distributed based on population density. That is, the counties will get a check every quarter based upon unincorporated population and that share. And every municipality in the state, including Thurmond, population 7, will get a check a quarter based on that 25% share. There's also a new sharing provision that was added a few years ago where 5% of whatever the state gets net-wise is returned to the coal-producing counties. And those numbers, back in the day, about 20, 30 years ago, used to be about $16 million a year. And it went down quite a bit during COVID, but in the last complete year on coal, if you add the post shares together, the county governments that produce coal have gotten $41.4 million of revenue. A big increase from the prior year. Prior year it was about 21 million. So they basically doubled. And then the 25% share is based on population, about 8.2 million. And then we get to, in the middle there is oil and natural gas. And oil and natural gas actually is split into two parts. There's natural gas that comes from coal bed methane wells. The legislature decided to dedicate all that 5% tax to the producing counties. For the most part, or all kinds. That's actually got a little complicated formula there. And then the oil and gas that's not from coal bed methane is divided 90-10, 90% is the state share, 10% is the local share. And on the local share, 75% goes to the producing counties and 25% is distributed on the basis of all population, just like coal. There was a more recent carve out of from the old vertical wells, and production from vertical wells, traditional wells is going down. Nobody's built a vertical well in some time, and so it's depleting. So a couple of years ago, the legislature decided to reduce the tax rate on vertical wells from 5% to 2.5%, give 90% of it to DEP for oil plugging purposes, and 10% to local governments. Now, the amount that went to DEP most recently in October was $3.6 million. So we're not getting a tremendous amount of revenue from those old vertical wells. On the natural gas side, natural gas and oil, this is based on calendar year 21 activity. Total of $31.3 million went to producing counties, and about $10.4 million on the 25% funding. Coal bed methane folks got an additional $1.6 million. And most of that, about 85% was natural gas, about 15% was oil. And then I don't even want to get into reclamation. There you have a coal reclamation waste coal tax that's 2.5% that's dedicated to counties, but we haven't had a whole lot of activity there in recent years. So this is sort of how it's all distributed. So local government share into that revenue as well as the states. And I may have gone a little longer than I wanted to. If you have any questions about this, the numbers are way up here in 22. Will continue to probably be way up in 23. What the industry is going to look like in 6 months, hard to say. Energy Information Administration believes that prices are going to ease down every time, but every month their forecast on short term changes radically from the previous month. So it's a worldwide commodity, and when markets will eventually straighten out, we had during COVID, one of the problems with COVID is we were still consuming goods, we just weren't producing goods. So when you lose that time, you never get that time back. And then add that to geopolitical uncertainties, and then you have what we have today.
Any questions for Mr. Nico?
Deputy Secretary, nice presentation, thank you very much. You said earlier that oil and gas service tax has the allowance for transportation. Does the coal service tax have reciprocal allowance for transportation?
There's a transportation right off of coal service. It's at the mine mouth. There's a little bit of value added that's added to coal. There's no value added on the natural gas side, but if you clean the coal and do a few things to it, that's added in as a value added on the coal severance. But that's only for coal, not for gas.
And then you said the other included sand and is there other?
There's a few other little minerals, but they're not a whole lot of money. I don't have it in front of me, but it's not. We used to tax limestone and sandstone. The legislature decided to exempt limestone from severance tax about 2 years ago. We used to tax timber. We haven't taxed timber for probably close to 5 years. Those were the other severance taxes that were in the code at one time that have been removed. But there wasn't a tremendous amount of money involved in either one of those.
Secretary, thank you for your presentation. Is there any consideration been given to extraction of rare earth elements? And severance that may or may not be associated with those?
The West Virginia Code provides for severance tax on extraction of all minerals. So I think that's a policy that the legislature may want to look at some point in time. It was discussed briefly last year. I think there was maybe a bill or two introduced that would have provided some sort of either exemption or treatment on rare earth minerals. But of course, rare earth minerals historically have been worth about this. So you know, severance tax on a zero is still going to get you anywhere. But if under current law.
Not really a question, but an observation. Interesting that we did tax it. You know, a lot of the processes where they're being pulled from coal products, where it was already taxed once.
Yeah, I'll give you another example of the mineral we tax. We tax salt production. And salt used to be used quite a bit in chemicals. There's a tax, it's other minerals. Not long ago, I think there was an exemption put in place because there was a salt operation that was here in Kanawha County that produces table salt, basically. And technically, there's severance tax on that. Severance tax is basically a tax on all mineral production. Not aware that the chemical industry in recent times has been extracting salt for their needs, but that used to be a big part of the industry years ago.
Any other questions for Mr. Nico?
Mr. Chairman, not a question. Thank you. An observation. Margaret and I shared a very positive relationship for many years. I'm just continue to be extraordinarily impressed with your knowledge of all these numbers. Now you can recite them, and they're pretty impressive numbers.
Well, it's all part of my job duties in recent years in order to try to figure out where the revenue collections for the state are. In West Virginia, our severance tax goes right into our general fund. We use a little bit of it for infrastructure bonds, but those bonds will be paid off in the next 5 years or so. But beyond that, it's general revenue for the state and for all practical purposes for counties. Not all states do it that way, particularly the western states. So that you live by the sword and die by the sword. Right now is a good time.
Actually goes to what I was just thinking. I think a lot of people get excited, and I certainly do too, but Margaret felt similar to me. You see the higher they go, the harder they have to fall.
The higher they go, their biggest threats are depletion and technological innovation. Technological innovation is one of the things that's hit the coal industry. The technological innovation in natural gas. In the Jimmy Carter was president, we were running out of natural gas, and you kind of put the sweater on and stand by the fire. So technology changes the ability to mine products, and then if we get into technology on hydrogen and some other, that has ultimately had an effect on everything. So the higher the price of your commodity, the more likely somebody's going to develop some alternatives. So that's always at play in severance tax as well.
Thank you very much, Mark. I really appreciate it. topics he's going to talk about are, all the numbers and statistics that come from different sources and probably cats, just give you some, we have, I guess, points we want to make and maybe different ways we could take a look at that. I think that's what we're going to just maybe say that for the end.
Absolutely, yeah, that'd be great. I'd like to talk about the different ways that these numbers could be interpreted or applied, and I was relieved to see some of my figures in Rebecca and Mark's presentation earlier, so that was a little bit of a relief. But as James said, my name is Graham Platts. I'm the Deputy General Counsel for the West Virginia Department of Commerce, and the idea behind the energy inventory was to provide a basic overview of the energy industry here in West Virginia, and an inventory of the energy assets, as well as some capacity and production numbers associated with those assets. So I'd like to start with total electric generation in West Virginia, and you can see that in year 2020, 56 million, almost 56.5 million megawatt hours were generated in West Virginia, and that's a significant number. 1 megawatt hour is enough to power 330 homes for 1 hour, and so 56 million really is a significant amount of energy. And West Virginia, as was mentioned earlier, is the number 5 energy producing state, supplying 5% of the nation's total electric generation. And West Virginia, despite being in the top 10 of energy consumption per capita, West Virginia also only uses about half of the energy that it produces, making it one of the leading states that supply excess energy to regional grids. Not included in that 56 million megawatt hour figure is biomass, petroleum, other gases, and battery storage. Battery storage actually had a negative net megawatt hour generation for 2020. Here, before we break down further that generation, I wanted to steal this chart from the West Virginia Bureau of Business and Economic Research, and it divides some of the top power plants here in the state based upon whether they're a regulated utility or an independent power producer, and for our purposes, independent power producer is defined to mean supplying energy to the PJM grid, and regulated utility is regulated by the PSC here and supplying end-use electricity to consumers. So let's start with the independent power producers. In 2020, almost 16 million megawatt hours produced there, and you'll see the breakdown from energy sources listed below. And there's a much greater distribution of energy sources that constituted that 16 million megawatt hours, much more so than you saw with the total generation or what you'll see with the electric utilities. Electric utilities in 2020 produced almost 41 million megawatt hours of electric energy. And you'll see that coal-fired power plants produced 98% of electricity used by West Virginia consumers in that calendar year. Skipped one, I think. Yeah, and so to wrap up with the electric utility part of the presentation, here are the seven private and 2 public electric utilities that are the players here providing end-use electricity to consumers, and the 4 main ones that we're all familiar with, Wheeling Power, Potomac Edison, Mon Power, and AEP, take the lion's share of the marketplace here. Okay, something that was helpful for me to think about when I started diving into energy for really the first time in depth to look at to prepare for this presentation and really catch up and get to speed with the department's goals related to energy was the net capacity factor, and it helped me to think of that as an efficiency percentage. And so the net capacity factor is the total megawatt hours produced over a certain time period, typically a year, divided by the total megawatt hours producible if running at full capacity during that same time period. To the right is a chart of the national averages for efficiency percentages or net capacity factors by fuel source. Nuclear is at the top with close to 93% as the most efficient by far, and solar is down just hovering around 25% as one of the least efficient resources that we have. Our net capacity factors throughout West Virginia track pretty closely to these national averages with slight variations. So this is a little preview of something I want to talk about towards the end of the presentation, which is a dashboard created by the DEP under the leadership of Secretary Ward and with the help of John King, who was gracious enough to come today in case there are questions about that. But this dashboard is designed to show what might be possible if people are interested in having this continue. You want to know about any specific power plant, any substation, transmission lines, or anything along that nature. And so we'll get to that towards safety slides to discuss what's on that dashboard, because I didn't trust myself to really be able to make it work. So we'll see how that goes. But starting with coal. So this is what you can access on that dashboard. And if you select coal as your resource that you want to focus on, the left-hand picture shows power plants throughout the state, coal-fired power plants. That those columns on the right show the general metrics that are associated with each power plant, including their distributor utility and their nameplate capacity. And so you can click on any one of those circles to access plant-specific data. And doing so with John Amos, for example, here, and I know it's difficult to see, hopefully it'll be easier on the dashboard. But here you can see this type of information that's available for every plant in the state. You can see the year at issue, the fuel source, the plant capacity factor, the megawatt hours produced, the emission totals, and like I said, this is widely available throughout the state. Also, when we're thinking about coal, it has some of the cheaper energy prices for electric end use, especially when compared to the PJM. Chairman Charlotte Lane of the PSC wrote a recent editorial about that and is actually speaking to a clean energy conference that's going on at the Marriott about a similar issue today, I believe. Coal also in 2022 were projected to mine close to 82 million tons of coal. That's 4 tons short of the United States international exports. And so West Virginia produces almost enough coal to cover the entire nation's international exports. So there are opportunities for West Virginia to increase that contribution. And another important thing that we need to consider when talking about the coal industry here is its economic impact in terms of who it employs. It is far and away the largest employer. Close to 12,000 employees here are employed through the coal mining operations, and you can see the other industries laid out there as well. Some coal-specific information about plants. Mountaineer and Amos will be operational past 2028, and a recent decision from the Virginia PSC has ordered that Virginia ratepayers will share in some of the wastewater treatment upgrade costs that were originally going to be burdened only by West Virginia ratepayers. Excuse me. On the other side, the Pleasance Power Station, unless I'm mistaken, as I understand it, the Australian buyer for that plant has backed out of the deal, and that plant is set to retire in 2023 without intervention. So that's something to certainly keep an eye on. Switching gears to talk about gas, again on the dashboard, this is what you would see if you select gas as the resource that you want to focus on. And the locations of the power plants map closely to that of the coal plants because a lot of our natural gas helps supply power to those coal-fired power plants, with the exception of Cerrito down at the bottom on the right side, which is providing end-use electricity to consumers. West Virginia has just under 50,000 producing wells, which is 10% of the nation's total. An interesting fact about that is, despite having so many wells and such a large percentage of the nation's total, in the years 2015 to 2020, West Virginia actually lost over 1,000 producing wells. That's not inconsistent or uncommon throughout the country. All natural gas producing states, except for North Dakota, lost wells, a significant number of wells during that same time period. And it's not inconsistent with the increase in production that we've seen either. The technology has developed so rapidly and so exponentially that a singular well can be responsible for much more extraction and much more natural gas production. That's something that John Deskin, or Dr. Deskins of WVU, spoke about at the legislature's November meetings, and that presentation is worth taking a look at if you're interested. This next thing is something I've stole from Craig Kazera of Shale Crescent USA, who presented at the Governor's Energy Summit, and it's a mindset shift that stuck with me. Reframing proximity to feedstock as more important than access to cheap labor to attract dependent businesses. And using that mindset to make the pitch that Central Appalachia can be and is one of the most profitable places in the world for a petrochemical plant or other dependent businesses. And this next slide kind of illustrates that point. If we want to use our imagination and replace Ohio with West Virginia there, transportation costs are one of the driving factors for the end cost that consumers have to pay across a variety of industries. And if you can reduce or take out a lot of that transportation costs, not only are you lowering the total price that the consumer will have to pay, but you're also reducing the emissions associated with each product. And that's huge for energy industry or for really any business that's looking to start somewhere, as we've seen. They're interested in green energy being available. They're interested in green energy initiatives. And if you can offer them to build on top of their feedstock for what they need to produce their product and offer them to cut their emissions significantly, that's an attractive pitch. And to the natural gas production on the right side with the Marcellus Shale and Green at the top. North in New York, excuse me. So something to note there is that not only have we consistently been drilling at the highest level, we've increased our production by the greatest margin as well. This is also available on the dashboard for hydro and wind and other energy sources, and the same metrics that we talked about earlier apply. Wind is the same way, and when we look at the dashboard, you can see a consistent pattern with wind energy and where those resources are located. They're along the ridgelines, they're along the coasts, and they're in the plains in the Midwest. And that's where the greatest access to wind is. So we'll take a look at that, but something to consider with wind energy is getting that energy from the rural generation point where it's typically located to more populated centers for use. Battery storage plays a big part of that, as well as improving our transmissions lines in terms of the material they're constructed out of and the size and the number of them. The Inflation Reduction Act provided a few tax credits that are interesting for battery storage, and we hope to see that make some type of contribution. Some of those tax credits are already paying dividends, as I believe Rebecca noted earlier. The 1,800 megawatt natural gas facility that's going into Doddridge County should be operational also in 2028, and that was made possible through some of those tax credits that company is taking advantage of. Other exciting projects that come to mind are the 50 megawatt solar project that First Energy is working on. They have a few different sites throughout the state where they're putting different solar facilities, and they're currently accepting applications from ratepayers to use that solar energy to power their homes. So that brings us to the grid and transmission lines and substations, which admittedly was one of the parts of the energy industry that I felt most uncomfortable with and still do. It's quite complicated, but what I think is interesting is the ability and the opportunity to increase capacity and security through the all-of-the-above policy and the one-on, one-off idea of if we're going to retire a megawatt, we need to have something to replace that megawatt of equal capacity. Another interesting point with grid reliability and stability is hybrid use. I think that's something that could be explored more, and having the option for one single energy user to take that energy from multiple different sources. So what are some untapped energy sources and uses? I couldn't give a West Virginia energy inventory without mentioning the hydrogen hub, but I'm not terribly involved with that process other than knowing that the proposal's been submitted and we're waiting for encouragement or discouragement on that front. Nuclear, geothermal, and biomass are all greener energies that we don't currently take advantage of here in West Virginia, but have relatively high capacity factors that make them worth exploring. Nuclear has been a recent interest of the legislature, as we know, and biomass, I think, is compatible with West Virginia's current industries. It encourages rural economic development. There are abundant resources for it, and it's symbiotic with other industries prevalent here, like timbering and agriculture. So there are options for us to look forward and continue that all of the above policy. So now if we'll go back to the dashboard here, I want to give a brief demonstration of how it works, hopefully. I don't have the mouse. Oh, there it is. Okay, great. Thank you. Hopefully here. I don't know. Well, I'm glad I included my backup slides. That's unfortunate. Well, generally, this isn't as exciting as I had hoped, but yeah, let's see. It wants to. Oh. I don't know. Well, it's all right. It's fine. We'll send out a link, and it's pretty self-explanatory and fun to play around on, and I encourage you to do that. But if there are any questions, I'm happy to take them.
First of all, great job.
Thank you.
More of a comment than a question. You talking about transmission lines. I'm guessing you watched that we had going forward on all of the above. Back in the day, when I was PM, we'll call it a set 65 KV transmission line project. It took 14 years to
Wow.
get permitted.
Mhm.
West Virginia and Virginia. So I think that's gonna be one of the biggest impediments. So that's that observation. Again, really good job on this thing.
Thank you.
Any other questions for Grant?
This is Colin Graham, nice presentation, thank you.
Thank you, Spurt.
Very nice. Just maybe a couple of comments. Would it be possible for you to share your presentation with the board?
Absolutely.
Maybe include a link to the dashboard.
Certainly, and I would absolutely welcome comments on the dashboard. John is here to answer any general questions you might have, but we would like input on how can this be most functional for all of us, and we're the people that are going to be using this most frequently. We want to make it available to the public so they can see this information in real time, and I think it could be a great resource statewide.
It's a great dashboard.
It's-
GP's
All right, well, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Grant, wrapping up, I just want to acknowledge and thank Vice Chair Rosavani for the general idea of this presentation. Generated from this is a great tool for us to have as we're looking kind of back and forward. We did a lot of work with program development. So thank you, man. Appreciate it. Well, this time we'll move on to our next item on the agenda, which is our Vice Chair's report. So I'll acknowledge everybody.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a lot to report this time. Given Graham's report, he did the majority of the heavy lifting there, so appreciate that. One thing I would like to mention is that we've been working on a logo for the agency. We've gotten some help from the state, some people that helped us develop that. Chairman, I've been doing that. I think we may have a,
And we had it ready to pull up, and I think they're in the same problem with that browser. Maybe prevent us.
if we don't have the ability to pull it up today, what we will do is send it to all the authority members for review. It's not finalized by any means. We'll send it to each of you guys for your comments, suggestions, thumbs up, thumbs down, just general comments. And on that, what we hear from everybody, see what the thoughts are, and how we go forward from there.
I can pull it up on my computer.
Well, I'll just send it out to everybody. It's, it's simple enough. It's not, we weren't going to adopt it or anything today. So, just appreciate any feedback anybody has, and then we can adopt it too. So, unless we have, much negative feedback, we'll adopt it at the next meeting.
And to alleviate any concerns, neither James nor I designed it.
Yes.
We've had some help with that. Mr. Chairman, that's all I have.
Well, now moving on to announcements. I'll announce at our next regularly scheduled meeting, which will go back into our regular, at least tentatively plan on meeting the last Wednesday of each month, so January 25th will be our next meeting. That is right after the legislative session starts. So unless something comes up and I can't meet, we'll meet then, and then potentially have some insight from folks on how we can be involved or learn about what's the issues that are affecting the legislature. Have discussions with folks in the legislature and also the governor's office. I think we're plan on us being a resource for them. So, with that, are there any other announcements from you?
Just a question for us, some board members when this legislation is in session. Is there any possibility, finding parking is really crazy, is there any accommodations or anything made for that? Or official business, or is it just fend for yourself?
I'm gonna look into that. It's generally it's pretty tight. I don't know actually how parking. I actually don't know how parking works.
That's probably should be.
I know somebody gave me a placard and I had a spot, and that's the extent of my knowledge. Megan and others are far more intuitive, so I'll look into it.
I'll take that off your plate.
Okay.
Mark's got it, Department of Administration. I'll see if we can take care of that for the next meeting.
Yeah.
Important.
I'm just there with it. So. Okay, well, I think that also covers our next item, remarks by members. Seeing none, we'll move, entertain a motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. All opposed? Motion carries. We are now adjourned. Thank you very much.